everyone, my name is Suzy Levy and I'm the Managing Director and founder of a small company called The Red Plate. And our ambition is to make bold ambitions happen in this space, in the people space, in leadership, in culture, in inclusion and diversity. And there are a lot of organizations with bold ambitions, but not a lot of them with the right plan, skills, or understanding of how to get there. There's actually been some incredible content today, by the way, might I just say, and I hope long may it continue as we go through. Today I'm going to talk about 3 trends that I see happening in organizations who are starting to move the dial. But I'm going to go well beyond gender and talk about much broader diversity spheres and sectors, because I think if you want to move gender, you have to move away from women. So 3 shifts. The first thing is inclusion and diversity started out in this far left right thing to do box. And actually there's a lot of right thing fatigue. Why should we do it? It's the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do. But if you really want to move the dial, it has to be commercially relevant, viable for your customers, the products. Your employees have to know you're not doing it because it's a CSR project, but because you believe it's part of the future of business and your business. Second shift that's happening, diversity and minority programs, where let's put all the women in a room, let's put all the ethnic minorities in a room, all the people with a disability in a room. And actually, if you want to shift, I don't know if anyone's read Lord Brown's book, the only way to shift is to engage the majority and fix the systems. It's great to have these programs. Fundamental, because women are different than men. Ethnic minorities are different than their white counterparts, but you can't put them all in a room, by the way. Ethnic minorities are ethnically different, culturally different. I'm different as an American. Even though I might have white skin, I will have fundamental cultural foundations which will be changing my behavior. If we don't change the system and engage the majority, we won't get there. The third concept, which is an LGBT concept, is the concept of in and out. And actually, most employees operate in an in mode. I don't care what diversity group you do or do not belong to, people assimilate to a majority culture. They figure out how to get on, what gets rewarded, what gets promoted. And actually, the more in culture you have, the less likely you're going to get diversity of thinking. Out behavior, a little bit radical. Out behavior in what we wear. Out behavior in everything of who we are and the way we operate. Now, these are not binary things insofar as there is no right and wrong. It's still the right thing to do. You should still have diversity and minority programs. And actually, a level of inness is good. It is. It's about having a culture that we all kind of gleam and connect to. But if you don't mix what's over here on the right, I don't think most organizations will be as successful as they aim to be, because this is where some of the nuanced thinking begins to happen. So let's look at the first shift. We've talked a little bit about it today. So this right thing to do over here, and business in the community, by the way, I love. But inclusion and diversity got put next to CSR. And CSR got put away from the business frequently, not part of the core product of what an organization was trying to do. And in fact, I heard Surrey in Cheshire speak last night, and he talked about CSR in the beginning was about being 10% less of a baddie. How do we do less evil today? Right, to the earth, to our social consciousness. And actually, organizations who get it right, CSR, are fundamentally part of their product strategy, and inclusion and diversity fundamentally part of their commercial relevance. And it takes some pretty sophisticated thinking to get there and not have it just a separate department where we do less evil and do less harm. So it started in this away bucket, in this let's do right by the community. And in the last year, it has begun to transform. And I'm going to talk a little bit about advertising, or femvertising, as it's coined. There's a whole Guardian article yesterday on femvertising, if you want to see all of the different examples. But actually, why it becomes more commercially relevant in how you adjust your sponsorship and your products is where we're beginning to see moving beyond advertising. So, Like a Girl, who's here has seen the Like a Girl, by the way? Right, about half the audience. The thing that you're struck by, and why I think it's one of the best, and it just won an award this week of best advertising. I forget who the award was by, but actually it's because there is an alignment with the age that girls get their period. So this is always panty liners. What are they doing talking about being like a girl? And the way it begins is a girl who, they ask older girl, a young woman, to run, and she goes, you know, and kind of laughs at herself and pretends what it's like to run like a girl or throw a ball like a girl. Then they ask a group of really young girls to run and throw a ball, and they're intense and they're fierce and they don't see any difference. And the reason it's been so successful is not only does it begin to tackle the image of what women should be, it talks about why the age of when you get your period is the moment when you're the most vulnerable. So when you go into the campaign, they aligned this whole idea of becoming a woman with all the expectations about you, and we need to help girls gracefully get through that period and not lose those beautiful ambitions and view of who they are. So tying that adolescence thing. Now, there was a lot done in the retail sector. You see Dove, hashtag Real Beauty. Now these, by the way, are the millions of views and the hashtags they use. The second Like a Girl video is now at 64 million views, and the original Dove at 66 million views. This is just YouTube, right? That's some significant sharing going on. The amazing bit about the second Like a Girl video from Always is the ones who were sharing it on average were between 10 and 14 years old. Interesting. So we're creating young consumers of our products who are socializing our brand before we even really knew they cared about these things. So Dove's got 66 million, and it was like, let's redefine what beauty is for women, gray or gorgeous. One can argue whether that campaign had enough effect on what beauty looks like for women. And they started in this kind of feminine product and beauty space. And then Microsoft jumped in the game. Microsoft is not a retailer. What are they doing in this space, right? And they started launching a whole series of adverts called hashtag empowering. Beautiful videos, actually, around what technology does for disability, around what technology does for social economic transference. So if I think you're 88%, the next generation of individuals who earn in the lower 10th are 88% as likely to have the same economic viability. So you get stuck. But Microsoft believe that the enabler to break out of any sort of socioeconomic means is technology. So they've got a whole series, whether it's Estelle's Brilliant Boss, which is young black men, inner city. We're going to talk about how technology will get you out of here, to disability, to women. And then, after Microsoft was kind of dabbling in this, these were the early pioneers, if you will. Suddenly, in the last 60 days, a rampage of advertising have come out around LGBT. Now, some you will recognize. Does anyone know this advert? Anyone been watching the Rugby World Cup? Anyone? No one? One gentleman. So what's the advert about?
So it's the rugby player who came out as gay to his teammates and spoke about how supportive they all were.
Exactly. Gareth Thomas, the only openly gay rugby player in the world who has come out. He's a Welsh rugby player, and Made of More is their campaign. He talks about it in terms of it was the loneliest moment in his life, worrying about whether his teammates would accept him for being gay. And his teammates talk about, we still love him. He's still our teammate. This is all cool. Now this is Guinness jumping in, right? Irish brand drinks company jumping into LGBT. Doritos, does anyone know what this bag is or why I might be putting it up here? On September 15th, Doritos launched the Rainbow Bag. 10 pounds a bag. They sold out in under 2 hours. Why? It was for a charity called It Gets Better. Now, It Gets Better is a teen suicide charity based out of the US. In general, it is 3 to 4 times more likely for an LGBT teenager to commit suicide than one of who considers themselves heterosexual. It Gets Better is about saying, do you know what? here's a video, it's a video campaign of older people saying it does get better. You learn how to own it, and the world isn't against you, but it feels like it when you're figuring your sexual orientation out. Now Doritos have said, by the way, it's going to be launched internationally, it'll be in shops, and it's here to stay. Cheerios, Coca-Cola, Smirnoff, people are jumping in, and in fact, Fast Company ran an article this week, which was how not to or to market to your LGBT community. Interesting. Fast Company weighing in on an article around LGBT advertising. Now, banking. I put this one up here because in March of this year, I had a conversation with the chief marketing officer of one of the UK high street banks. And we were talking about progressive advertising, why it was critical on this consumer end. And the individual said to me, we're still not going to put a gay couple in a commercial. Why not? Well, last time we did that, we lost a bunch of customers who, for them, it wasn't part of their belief system, and they were willing to leave us. Now, I find this interesting. Now, this bank scores very, very well on the Stonewall Index. They are hugely committed, but for them, it's a worry. This is a polarizing issue in certain parts of society. So when these companies have come out, if you go out and read all the social media and all of the boycott Doritos, they're trying to make your children gay, by the way. This bag will make your children gay if you're not careful when they eat the rainbows. Billy Graham, when Wells Fargo launched in April of this year a commercial of two moms who are applying for a mortgage together, there was a far right movement in the US saying boycott Wells Fargo. Now what Wells Fargo did, a month after I was talking to this UK bank, is they were prepared. They said, if you want to take your business elsewhere, please do. Bold. And do you know what they did next? They had been preparing a survey and launched a press release, finances top of mind for LGBT community. This is relevant to our business. And by the way, this is anywhere between 4 and 7% of the population. Now the far right might be that much, maybe. Probably not when you look statistically speaking of individuals who'd be willing to take their business elsewhere. But what they were doing is saying we will no longer say one thing internally but not recognize this as a relevant customer set. So this is moving from retail into a conservative space. Banking is generally conservative in terms of how they market and what they do, and being willing to put data behind it. There are different issues for LGBT customers, partially because we haven't been allowed to have marriage previously, right? So our financial systems might be not quite as integrated. People might not yet know that we're even together. So therefore, we have different financial challenges. So really interesting, the banking space. And then I'll add a couple more things. So Virgin Media, by the way, and also, who else? This week, there's another UK retailer who's gone after women. So this is the Inspired, this was launched during the Rugby World Cup as well, about inspiring girls. Again, I couldn't quite figure out what it had to do with Virgin Media, but this goes back to the nuance of good advertising or just kind of jumping on the femvertising wagon. Now SSE I put here because actually, with a separate hat, I'm on the Women's Sport Trust. One of my aims is to change how we fund women's sport in this country. And what I see from a lot of organizations is they'll talk really big about what they're doing internally. A few of them will begin to come externally, but almost none of them will look at what they're doing with their sponsorship money. So internally, we're trying to fix this diversity chasm potentially, and yet externally, we're willing to put a bunch of money into sponsoring boys and men's sport. In fact, millions and millions and millions if you look at all the different footballers or things around. SSE were one of 5 companies who have major sponsorship of women's sport and the first landmark 6-figure deal for the Women's FA Cup earlier this year. Why? Does anyone know why they did it? They're very open in the press about this.
Differentiation?
65% of all decisions on home energy are made by women. They're clear. We want the female buyer. We're going to be great at this thing internally and externally, and we're not going to promote continued diversity gaps with how we operate externally. It's not just about advertising, it's about what we do, and also the products we're going to bring you and the way you'll understand your products are going to look different. So this is the beginning of this shift. Right thing to do? Absolutely. You can't skip that step. If you don't come in believing it's the right thing to do, you'll be sussed out almost immediately. What you're doing in the external space will be called pink it and shrink it. And generally, it won't do very well. And there are some great examples of classic things that have bombed in that space. Now, second shift, diversity and minority programs. Let's get all the minorities together, right? Like individuals. And actually, diversity started as a white women's initiative. Suffragettes, great movie. Can't wait to see it. But actually, LGBT race, culture, age, ability begin to gain momentum. And I think the single biggest point in this space sits right here with this rainbow flag. LGBT and the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community were the first one to start to say, how are we going to engage the heterosexuals? Because we kind of need them on the journey if we're going to be out. So allies emerged. And they only emerged in the last 2.5, 3 years. But they've taken huge swaths of employees on a journey within organizations. LGBT allies say, you will stand up and not only make it okay for me to be myself, but you will help me create a better workplace and a better culture as a person of a non-heterosexual orientation. And in fact, I'll help you with your heteronormative language. I'll help you with your policies and the fact that they're all created for heterosexual couples, and I'll help you get better. And actually 30% Club, kudos to Helena Morrissey and the team, they were the first ones to say, do you know what, we should have chairmen sponsoring the 30% Club, rather than a bunch of women getting in a room and saying, let's see how we can fix gender, shall we? Because we're only one gender. So interestingly, then He for She launches, right? So a massive campaign, amazing. And actually the statistics in there, and you've got Emma Watson saying, boys, I want you on the journey. The amazing stuff is not just what Emma did, but where that's gone. So 2 weeks ago, our Secretary of Education in the UK launched on 25 university campuses He for She, with boys rugby clubs, boys cricket clubs, boys football clubs. Because guess what? It's a better world for boys and men. It's a much better world when we get this feminism thing right. And if you haven't seen a video called The Mask You Live In, I highly recommend it. Because when you begin, I'll tell you a bit about The Mask You Live In, but when you begin changing the system, and I'm going to go into that in depth in a second, and engaging the majority, you start to understand that part of this is the box that we put boys in. Be a man. Man up. Grow some balls. These are terms that get batted around a schoolyard, actually. And they have a huge view in terms of defining what success is for men in a very, very tightly confined box. And later on, when we talk about behaviors in corporates and cultures, some of that has to do with the behavior we see in a schoolyard, which is pervasive. And actually, many boys don't want it. Not in any way, shape, or form. In fact, they'd like quite a different world, thank you very much. So engaging men in what's in it for them, not just what's in it for me, it is the right thing to do. But guess what? You and I will go on a journey together. Another one, allies came along amazingly so, but then gay marriage, suddenly, whose friendships on Facebook and LinkedIn suddenly became rainbows, right? Having visible ways that individuals who are not part of that minority can say, I'm there, I am with you, is really critical. And that conversation about understanding what either group is looking for is about redefining the future of the workplace, where everybody has a better future because of what you're doing. And Black Lives Matter, I will put this on here. The majority of people who support the Black Lives Matter campaign in the US, whilst politically challenging and it's about significant issues between police and the African American community, the majority of people who support that are white. Black Lives Matter. In the UK, in the US, we've got a problem. We want to see something done about it, right? So engaging individuals, whether it be race, sexual orientation, gender, you name it, you've got to have the majority on board, because it's their actions which will help change the system. And by the way, this is what a feminist looks like. Right, changing the system and what gets valued is how you get from a behavior where almost everyone's in to where there is room for being out. So you might laugh at this. Welcome, I'm sure you'll fit in nicely. But actually, that picture in the top right corner still looks like most organizations in the city today. You'll fit in nicely with a black suit and a shirt. Whether you're a woman or a man, you will confine to what we're looking for. And there is a lot of research out there that shows all minority groups or minority individuals who rise to the top in the early days assimilate. You'll hear behaviors of women, big shoulder pads, who behave more like men than the men, more aggressive, more this to get to the top. And that is a natural phenomenon, deeply studied, sociologically proven pattern of behavior for minorities. In order to get to the top, you assimilate to the majority culture. Now, LGBT, there's a lot to be learned here. First of all, out is not one moment. You don't suddenly decide to tell your mom and dad that you're gay or lesbian or bisexual or whoever, and then you're forevermore out. It doesn't work that way. Out is in choice of every moment. Am I going to be myself? Am I safe? Is it easier to just head down, not say what I was going to say, not tell people about my weekend or my family? Now, when you begin to understand LGBT out, this continual decision making, and you apply it to other areas, take mental health for example. Most people with mental health problems are in, very deeply in. They don't want anyone to know in a high performance environment there might be something wrong with them. And yet, mental health instances are rising drastically if you look at PMI figures from, or insurance figures or just in general, partially because of the challenges we have in terms of volume and breadth of issues across business since 2008. I put this one on here specifically. Cultural inness has everything to do with the simplicity of straightening your hair. African hair is not straight. Let's just be clear. It is not in any way, shape, or form straight. It's beautifully kinky and big. But there are very few African Caribbeans in the UK who walk into a modern workplace and let their hair be without straightening it. Why? I have a colleague who one morning did not really make sure everything was perfectly slicked down, and she picked another colleague up in her car and he was like, "Whoa, what happened to your hair?" She was like, "I left it how it is naturally today." Actually. And it's everything from what we wear. What you wear is important because that's part of the assimilation, but it's how you behave and then how that behavior gets rewarded. Now up here, here's some examples of organizations who are thinking about systematic change, who are very open about them. There are lots more than this. And recruiting, performance, and promotion. So let's drop GCSE requirements, let's drop how many A levels you had to have. Let's fundamentally change the way that we're recruiting in order to get a much more broad set of individuals applying. Let's change the language in our job specs. Let's quit using systems engineers, and gadgets to try and get women to apply to tech jobs. In general, we're not as gadget oriented towards men. We're a lot more interested in this social impact or what the technology delivers at the end of the technology than the technology itself. So you've got these, we're changing the recruiting, we're changing the promotion criteria. If you look at promotion criteria and what gets rewarded, most of it is results oriented, has a point of view, it might even be decisive in their action, and actually those are male patterns of behavior. And they're good, they're great. But there are feminine patterns of behavior proven over time, sociologically, that in general don't get adapted into the performance management appraisals. Example I would give is team versus individual. Patternistically, women operate much more holistically in a team. And they'll think about bringing the whole team on, and you can prove it. Different studies over time will prove it. And yet almost every performance rating is an individual performance rating, not how well the overall team did. And as you see performance, there's a lot of swings happening at the moment. We're not going to do a 1 to naught performance rating. We're actually going to begin to do fundamentally different, more conversational performance rating over time. You start to see that adaptation happen. SAP went so far as to crowdsource their new values and behaviors. As a modern organization, we want to know what you think. And one of the 5 pillars their employees came up was build bridges, not silos. Really interesting, right? Their employees came up with that as we need that to be successful. It's a very feminine thing. So how do you rebalance your performance management criteria and the way you rate to embrace feminine and masculine? We want both. We absolutely want both. But today, if you step out of the boundaries, and there's a great research in the last 2 weeks from Stanford around tens of thousands of performance reviews were loaded into a system. They were then analyzed on keywords, and of course the gender of the rater and the ratee were put in. And some amazing, scary statistics came out. Women were 3 times more likely to be pulled up for aggressive behavior. Are women more aggressive than men? Patternistically, just seeing some heads shaking. Honestly, do we think women are more aggressive than men?
They confuse it, it's passion.
It's passion. It's confused passion, right?
I've been told recently, actually, in my appraisal, everything was great until you can be a bit direct and aggressive.
You can be a direct. So it's not just allowing for feminine and masculine patterns of behavior. It's allowing women to have a masculine pattern of behavior, and men, by the way, to have a feminine pattern of behavior. So we call people up when they don't fit in their box that we're used to them being. 3 times more likely. By the way, men were 2.5 times more likely to get positive ratings with the word outcome. They must deliver more outcomes than us. So interestingly, H&M, and I'll finish this in terms of in and out. Has anyone seen Close the Loop? Right, launched 2 weeks ago. I think 7.8 million views was week 1. It's well over 20 million views now, and it's being heralded as the most diverse commercial of all time. Now, why? Because it was all about refuse the rules. You know, wear red, or wear red if you're a redhead. You know, show your panty lines. Don't show your panty lines. You know, wear a dress if you're a boy. And the whole thing was around break all the rules around what you wear. But interestingly, it's been the media conversation around the hijab since then. Because what did H&M launch that same week? A colored line of headscarves. Own it or don't own it, your choice, right? Some really brilliant campaign, and actually it's around Close the Loop, around sustainable clothing, which one would argue they're not in that space yet, but looks like they're trying to go there. So 3 reasons why I think these shifts should matter. There are lots more reasons, but with only 20 minutes, and I'm sure I'm quickly running out of time. We've kind of dabbled around them earlier today with a lot of the conversation from individuals, presenters up here. So women are often, and again, patternistically speaking, more socially conscious in terms of how they choose their employer, what that employer does. And actually when you saw, and I forget which slide it was, it might have been yours, Catherine, in terms of the type of career that that women tend to choose over men. Actually, it was yours, Rachel. You'll see a social consciousness thing play out there. A teaching, I'm helping society, I am engaging in a change for society. And their judgment goes beyond role, salary, title, and gender. What I mean by that is, men are significantly more likely to return a headhunter call, in my experience, deeply. And the headhunter calls and says, I got a job for you, here's the pay, here's the title, here's the organization. Women, in particular, senior women, go where they know the organization and they know what the organization is about. They go to a known entity where they knew someone on the inside and they come via a friend. The more senior, the higher, the more likely, if it's a woman, it did not come from a headhunter. In fact, if you ask headhunters in terms of the return number of calls, there's something like 80% of the return calls, or 8 out of 10, come from men. Now, their judgment goes beyond gender. They don't just want to work for an organization who gets women right. They want to work for an organization who gets the world right. Right? And then they can see that the organization really cares, and that internal right thing to do and external market relevance the more an organization is visibly doing things that matter, not the pink it and shrink it just for them, they care about LGBT rights. It's not that men don't, by the way, but their judgment of an employer in decision making is more skewed, in my experience, than men's are by those things. So they look more holistically, they look more around not only what do I believe the organization does, but how closely is it aligned to what they do. Younger generations of men and women have a much greater, so young boys are more towards that box. I want to read your Gen Z research, but I'm guessing it says something a bit like that, at least in my experience. The second is, organizations making these system adjustments are the ones who are reaping the balanced results. They're the organizations that I'm working with who are getting perfectly proportional promotion results, who are starting to see volumes of individuals, of minority groups coming up. And gender is where they're making a lot of progress. We still have so much to do in ethnicity. And in senior leadership. So when you've got the right systematic changes around performance, promotion, recruiting, suddenly you'll see a movement, and actually it makes women's day. It does. I mean, it's not just the performance and the promotion, but when you can see that actually there is a future here for me, there is a deep connection to that. You change the system, you are likely to see balanced results, and that matters. And this is the third one. I'd like to see more options for men, by the way. But women are told they have lots of options. And actually, when you look at leaving surveys and exit surveys, where women go versus where men go, frequently the women's exit survey will be like 10 different places. She started her own business. She went to a small company. She did the stay-at-home mom thing for a few years. She contracted, she worked. So there's almost no pattern because there are so many different options, and they will exercise them. The world tells her she can be the breadwinner or not. The world still tells boys and men they must be the breadwinner. And when they leave, if you look at exit surveys for men, they leave for a competitor, with industry, bigger ambition related to salary, money, title, patternistically. Now again, I'm talking 80-20 rule here. But as we begin to explore and enhance what male paths might look like, how they might be different, and I do think this is important. One of the fundamental differences between men and women in neuroscience is not so much how their brain maps, but from what I can tell, it's testosterone. Men get significant volumes more injection of testosterone throughout the course of a day than a woman does. And actually, it's how the brain reacts when testosterone hits it that fundamentally shows a difference in behavior for men and women. And if you don't know anything about testosterone, what testosterone allows men to do, and women, is be singular-minded. Go hunt that woolly mammoth. That's what it was there for. It was a fundamental fight, flight, you need it, inject, go. The singular-mindedness of men's careers and the patternistic behavior, a lot of it can be attributed, they very focused on one thing. Whereas women, we don't have that injection all the time. We have a significantly less testosterone. Our brain patterns show it, we show how it reacts and all sorts of things. And actually, as you begin to allow for opportunity for men, it creates a new world. But it creates a new world where organizations have to adapt to modern workplace. Not just flexible working, volume of working. Balance of life and work in a way when we work in a global world where most job specs probably are big enough for 2 people to do, let alone on 3 days a week or work from home every once in a while. It will require organizations to begin to address some of those more fundamental modern working principles, not just come in it from a diversity angle. And I think Catherine said on the part-time, it might have been you, Rachel, that we see part-time being a thing that basically moms do, working moms do. And that's formal part-time. Informally, most surveys, men do more informal part-time working. They take it whenever they need it. Right? They go off for an hour or 2 here, they just don't do the formal thing. And figuring out how we find that balance of formal and informal in a modern working world where women feel as empowered and men feel as empowered through shared parental leave and all sorts of things is part of the future of the organizations who will succeed. Anyway, thanks very much for your time today.